All right, so welcome all. I am State Representative Jamie Green, and I represent the 65th House District, which is way over directly east from here in Macomb County, St. Clair counties, and Lapeer counties. So I currently serve on the House Education Committee, which I am the vice chair. You want to know something cool? For the last 14 years, I have homeschooled my kids. So now you have a homeschool mama who wasn't always a homeschool mama. I did try the public school systems in kindergarten and first grade as a whole other Jesus testimony. So it's not that I approach this for the faint of heart, but it is something actually that God always desired me to do, and then really created a path for me to homeschool, which I have successfully done without government overreach for the past 14 years in my home. So here we are today. And do you want me to give my side too and also introduce, or do you want to go with the history of Israel first? Okay, Katie's go. We're gonna roll with this. So we have been doing this Homeschool Freedom Forum because in December, Dana Nessel did a post on X where she said, and Israel's going to walk us through that history a little bit later, but she put a post on how we need to close that loophole, or I don't know if it's her, this is why Israel usually gives this part, but there was a post on X which then was followed up by the House Education Chair, so my counterpart. So you got homeschool mama vice chair, public school teacher chair, which is an interesting dichotomy. And he posted then how we need to close that loophole, which we have discovered, and this has been revealed through this process, is the registration process, which a bill has been drafted. I want to first, before I go any further, thank your two senators, Senator Victory and Senator, I'm from the east side, so Heisiga. Yes! Senator Heisiga, who is actually your host today. So if you guys, I'm going to give them a couple minutes or seconds to talk, to tell what's on their hearts as also fellow legislators.
Thank you, Representative, so much. And, when I first heard about this issue, it was because Eileen came forward and called me up and said, Mark, you got to find out what's going on with this. And we started brainstorming about what's happening. And, in the legislature, we can't possibly know all the issues. So people like Eileen keep us informed about the issues that are important to our strong base, the people that we know and trust. And we started talking about this and said, we have got to find a way to have a forum. And so after much work and lots of different venues and ideas, Eileen found this one. So I'm eternally grateful for her for this work here. The reason why we think this is valuable is just as much as it's important for you to hear from this expert panel as it is for us, your representatives in Lansing and the Senate, to know about what's happening so that we can articulate this to our colleagues. My district starts in Coopersville and Allendale and goes across Kent County. Northern Kent County includes everything north of Grand Rapids, north of Fulton Street, Ada, Cascade, and things like that. But I also brought in Ottawa County and starting out there. This is also why I thought it'd be great to have Senator Victory here, because he represents Ottawa County as well. And together, he and I work on lots of different legislative things together. And it's a strong team that we have, really representing people that I think have fundamental Christian values. And Roger's a great friend and partner. So I just turn over to Roger.
Thank you, Senator Heisiga. It's a privilege to be here today. And in this role as a senator or representative, sometimes key is we might be hosting these events, but we're also speaking at the events. Today, it's a great opportunity for me to sit there and listen, just like you, because I need to make sure that I'm equipped and learning the latest facts and concerns over this issue. Because my office has been engaged with this. You have members of the homeschool communities been reaching out. I want to encourage each one of you, if you have not reached out to your state senator or your state representative yet, that is on the to-do list to do tomorrow. We have to reach out. Numbers make a difference. It brings it to that level. And I want to give another round of applause to our outstanding state representative, Jamie Green. You've been knocking it out of the park, because I don't serve on the education committee. So, we have a host of issues, hundreds of issues. But because I don't serve on that committee doesn't mean I can't be involved. And this is how we get involved. And also, we want to make sure we align ourselves with those who are on those committees and our leadership on the committee. And that's why She's on the other side of the state. First of all, I want to shake your hand for coming to the west side. Welcome here and put those miles on and continue to bring this message across the entire state of Michigan. With that, I'm going to quit talking and I'm going to start listening. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have everybody here this afternoon. I am Israel Wayne with the Michigan Christian Homeschool Network. Our acronym is MICHN. We pronounce that as Mission. Some of you who have been around homeschooling circles for decades will remember our previous name, which was INCH. It's the same organization, just rebranded as Mission. So I want to give you a little background as to how we got here with homeschool regulations. Michigan used to, if you go back 35 plus years, we were probably the most regulated state in the United States. And through a series of events, some very brave families risked jail time and having their children removed from their custody, and won some Supreme Court cases back in the early 1990s. The DeYoungs and the Bennetts and Clonlara School and some others were very brave and gave us some court cases. And then in 1994, we established a homeschool exemption law, which was called Exemption F. Actually, in Michigan, you can homeschool under A, which is where you can incorporate as a private school. But most people homeschool under something called Exemption F. And that's been working really well here for the last 30 years. And so many thousands of families have specifically moved to Michigan because we have great homeschooling freedoms here. And so it's worked well, but unfortunately there are some people who are trying to encroach upon those freedoms, including Dr. Michael Rice, who is Michigan's Superintendent of Public Instruction. And really since about COVID time, he's been saying that we need to have a statewide registry of all homeschoolers. And he was pretty forthright about his motives for this. When you read newspaper articles in which he was interviewed in 21 and 22, and he basically, along with some of his colleagues, like the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the city of Lansing and others, they said that we've lost 150,000 students from the public school system in the last decade, 50,000 of those just since COVID. And today, that is over $14,300 per child when you count federal, state, and local taxes. So you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that is represented to local public schools. And so they want to get those children back into the public schools. Michael Rice said, one child leaving is one child too many. And the superintendent in Lansing said we need to find a way to get these children back into the public school system. So that was what they were saying was their primary motive for this registration bill that he was calling for. And while he called for it for 3 years, the legislature didn't really act upon it. When he raised this issue last year in 2023, we had concerns about it. So we met with Matt Colzar, who is the House Education Chair, and we wanted to know where he was going to stand on this, if he was going to pursue a registration bill. And in February of 23, he assured us that homeschoolers were not on the radar. He was not planning to go after homeschoolers. He said there's a lot of things we want to try to fix in the public school system. We have some reforms we want to make in the charter school world, but homeschoolers, not on our radar. Fast forward 9 months, and apparently it was on his radar. So he called for a registration of homeschoolers, and he retweeted a tweet from Dana Nessel talking about two families that had been in the foster care system that she alleged were abusing their children. And so she claimed that these families represented a need for us to have all homeschoolers in Michigan under some sort of a regulation. In fact, I'll quote this from Detroit 6. The homeschool environment allowed abuse in the Florey home to go unnoticed. Implementing monitoring mechanisms is crucial to ensure that all children, including those homeschooled, receive necessary protections. Now, I had read the press release that she sent out, and there were just a bunch of red flags, things that didn't line up, things that didn't make sense to me when I read it. I had a lot of questions about it. One of which is that she claimed that these two families, the Floreys and Browns, had gotten into foster care because they wanted to become rich off the system. I mean, I've never been a foster parent, but I just feel like there are easier ways to become rich. I don't know. It's just, I could be wrong, but I feel like most people get involved in foster care because they care about children and they want to help children. So I found that really insulting that the parents who are getting involved in foster care are doing so with some sort of a desire to get rich. Then secondly, over about a 15-year period of time, apparently these two families had over 30 children that had come through their home in the foster care system. And there was an argument that that was way too many. And so therefore, all homeschoolers in Michigan need to be regulated. Well, I mean, I don't know if you can follow that train of thinking, but the way that I see it, I'm a homeschool parent, and I didn't put any of those 30 children into those two homes. I'm pretty sure that was the foster care system that did that, and Child Protective Services and Department of Health and Human Services. So if there is someone who shouldn't have put 30 children into those two families, I would think that would indicate that this was a state oversight problem, not a homeschool problem. Another thing that was a red flag to me is that I know in Michigan, unless you have some sort of special exemption from a judge, it's against the law to homeschool foster children. So again, I'm thinking, how does this relate to all homeschoolers need to be registered because these children were not homeschooled, they were foster children. And then she said that these children were unnoticed. Well, they were not unnoticed by definition of being foster children. When you're a foster child, you're deeply connected to a whole bunch of mandated reporters, including Child Protective Services, the foster care, and the public school, when you're enrolled in the public school. And so the allegation that abuse was happening in these families over a 15-year span just did not make sense because they are surrounded constantly with mandated reporters who are supposed to keep them safe. And so if there was a failure to monitor these children, if there was a failure to keep them safe, it was not the fault of homeschoolers, it was the fault of, again, the system that simply was unwise in placing these 30 children into two homes that apparently were abusive for 15 years, according to their narrative, right? On top of that, one of the fathers, Mr. Brown, was actually employed by Child Protective Services as a CPS investigator. That's what he did for a day job. And so, again, it's like if this is true, then this CPS investigator is abusing his own children for 15 years, then, again, this just feels to me like it's a systemic CPS problem, not a homeschool problem. However, when we did a little bit more research, we found out that the allegations against these families were phenomenally egregious and trumped up. In fact, the Detroit News just did an article on this, published February 29th. The headline says, "Error-filled child abuse investigation reports lead to charges against two families." They actually were able to get recorded transcripts of interviews that CPS did with the children in these homes, and then they were able to compare CPS's reports with the actual recorded transcripts. The CPS reports were filled with allegations of the children accusing their parents of child abuse, but when they compared them to the actual recorded transcript interviews with the children did not make those allegations. Those allegations were made by Child Protective Services and falsified. And so there were false charges of child abuse. In fact, the state had already investigated these two families thoroughly. They had been involved in court, and all charges against both families were dropped at the end of May of 2023 by the state of Michigan for lack of evidence. And then Attorney General Dana Nessel decided to re-prosecute them with no new evidence, no new incidents, simply trying to retry them again for the cases that the state had already dropped. So this has really exposed, I think, some rank corruption within the foster care system, within Child Protective Service, and most importantly, within the Attorney General's office. And there's an adult child from this family. Her name is Shamber Rain, and she's been very vocal in the media with both the Detroit News as well as the Blaze just did a story on this as well. She claims that she was not abused. She's actually married to an adult child from the Brown family. I asked her, she contacted me and I asked her, I said, how many of the Brown children were making allegations of child abuse against their parents? And she said 0. I'm like, well, how can you have charges against someone when none of their children are accusing them of child abuse? It's just a very disturbing and troubling situation, as I said, that's now been exposed by these investigators who have found that the charges were largely falsified against them. But I asked what motivation Attorney General Nessel may have for going after her family, the Flore family, which she was adopted into. And she said that all the children in both families had been adopted through a Catholic adoption agency called St. Vincent's. Attorney General Dana Nessel prosecuted St. Vincent's because, based on their religious convictions, they did not allow adoptions to LGBTQ individuals or couples. And so she prosecuted them for that. This young lady, Shamber Rain, ended up being the public voice of opposition to Attorney General Nessel in her prosecution of St. Vincent's, and kind of got herself on the radar, if you will, of Nessel. And so Nessel lost the prosecution against St. Vincent's, and apparently she doesn't enjoy losing, and was kind of sore about that. And according to Shamber Rain, she believes that this became personal, and that led to these investigations against these two families being continued directly, personally, by Attorney General Dana Nessel, with Mr. Brown being fired from his job as a CPS investigator. I asked what the charges were against him, and basically she said he's a Christian, he's politically conservative, and he was on the other side of the political and social issues with most of his coworkers, and then on this St. Vincent's issue. So she believes that he was simply fired and then accused of child abuse falsely. So I think it's just really important. The reason I'm spending a little time on this is because these two stories were the narratives that Attorney General has been using to say all of you as homeschoolers in the state of Michigan need to be regulated because there's this loophole, supposedly, in the Michigan homeschool law that's allowing for abuse. But this situation, if indeed there was abuse that happened in those cases, which has not been proven by any court in Michigan, that was absolutely not a homeschool situation, absolutely the fault of Child Protective Services. So the Washington Post factors into this as well. They've been running a series of anti-homeschooling articles for the last year. There's about 12 or 14 of them, kind of lost count. Some of the reporting is just egregiously erroneous. They specifically targeted Michigan a couple of times. I was interviewed for a couple of the articles. And in one of the articles, they told this really heart-rending story of a young boy who was being raised in Michigan by his mother and father. They divorced. The father moved to California, remarried. His new wife did not like his little boy, in fact, hated his little boy, and egregiously abused him and unfortunately ended up killing him. It was a tragic story, heart-rending story. And so Washington Post said, since this stepmother in California killed this little boy in California, all homeschoolers in Michigan need to be regulated. And so the difficulty was that they had this heartbreaking story and then this call for a mandatory registration bill. And the argument was, wouldn't it be worth a little bit of inconvenience to homeschooling parents in Michigan if it would save just one child's life? Like, what if it would have saved this little boy, Roman Lopez was his name. What if it would have saved Roman Lopez's life? Wouldn't it have been worth it? And as I was talking to Peter Jamison, the reporter from the Washington Post, I said, Peter, you know for a fact that your reporting on this is disingenuous. You know it, because you've been reporting on this long enough. That you know that the state of California has an annual mandated reporting law that is what you're saying Michigan needs. And that child didn't die in Michigan, he died in California, where they have that law. That law did not protect Roman Lopez, and it will protect 0 children. Because having a child's name on a centralized education database protects exactly 0 children. It tells you nothing about what's going on in their home. It gives you absolutely no idea whether abuse is taking place in the home. There are thousands and thousands of children every year who are abused who attend public schools in Michigan. And they're around mandated reporters all the time. It doesn't get noticed. It doesn't get investigated. It doesn't get reported. And I said, Peter Jamison, this is not a homeschool story. This is a CPS story. Why are you not talking about the failure of CPS to actually investigate reported cases of abuse? And he said, well, actually, to your point with this Roman Lopez story, when they still lived in Michigan, this little boy's aunt actually called and reported suspected child abuse to Child Protective Services, and CPS never bothered to go investigate. I said, that's not in your story, Peter. That little tidbit never made it into the article. You just said that if we had a registration bill, it would have protected this boy and kept him alive. is that this just feels very much like it's an anti-homeschooling bias, particularly with the other like 12 to 14 articles that you've run attacking homeschooling. Of course, his response was, I don't have a bias. I'm just reporting facts. That's all I'm doing. I have no agenda here whatsoever. So then on this same day that this story came out calling for regulations in Michigan, December 6th, State Representative Matt Colzar said that the legislature is likely to see a bill that would at a bare minimum require the registration of homeschooled children in Michigan and perhaps establish additional oversight measures. Now we know the registration bill is simply a foot in the door. It's simply a way for them to be able to know all your child's personal information, to have their address, to have their home, their home email, phone number, all that. In fact, that same day, December 6th, I was on CBS television with him in Detroit, and the reporter asked him this question. I'll just read it. I imagine a lot of parents would say, surely they will want to know more than just knowing where the children are. I mean, receiving a letter that says this child is homeschooled, surely there would have to be some kind of home visit, some interaction, right? And this is what he says. It would be fair to say that. I mean, asking, so is the ultimate goal here home visits for homeschoolers? He said, it would be fair to say that. Then he says, but I think right now, the main thing we need to do is find out where they are. So this has been stated in their own words what their goal and intent ultimately is. If not in the first bill, and an additional bill that would come later, right? And so one of the things that I've learned over time is that when bureaucrats tell you directly that they're going to take your rights away, you should believe them, because they probably want to take your rights away. So then, again, they say that the legislature is poised to take up a regulatory bill in 2024. So we've been reporting about this, again, talking about how this is going to make it harder for homeschoolers to hide child abuse, et cetera, and just this correlation that they're trying to demonstrate between homeschooling and child abuse is completely fallacious. So we know a few things. We have a lot of research on home education, and we have some states that are very high regulation states. States like Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New York, where they have mandatory registration laws. They have mandatory standardized testing laws. Some of them even have laws where you have to be visited by some kind of government worker who has to oversee your curriculum and so on. So there are states that are super high regulation, and then there are states like ours that are low regulation, like Michigan, Texas, Idaho. These are low regulation states. And the research that we have has demonstrated conclusively two facts. Number one, that homeschoolers who live in higher regulation states do not perform better academically on standardized achievement tests than homeschoolers in low regulation states. So the thought would be, well, but if you had a mandatory registration law and you had mandatory standardized testing, then that would improve test scores from homeschool students. It does not. Categorically, emphatically, does not. In no way do additional regulations on homeschooling families improve academic performance of students. We have the data on that. The other thing is, we have data on child abuse in those regulated states and child abuse in the low regulation states, and there's no higher or lower incidences of homeschoolers percentage-wise in states that have low regulation versus high regulation. So it's just a complete non-factor. It does not contribute. Homeschooling regulations do not decrease child abuse in any situation. So what it does, essentially, is it provides no academic benefit, and it does not prevent child abuse. It simply provides more government control, more hoops for parents to have to jump through, more cost to taxpayers. It simply has no benefit to it whatsoever. So on the Senate side, Stephanie Chang, who used to be a representative and in 2015 introduced a bill that would have regulated homeschooling fairly severely. She's now on the Senate side. And the Washington Post told me personally that she still wants her bill that she wrote in 2015 passed as she wrote it. They actually have her quoted here as saying that lawmakers now seem more open to adopting homeschool regulations than when she last tried to do this in 2015. So apparently she is talking to some of her colleagues in the Senate about these homeschool regulations, and some of them seem more open to passing it. In case you want to know what her bill consisted of, This is a summary that was in a press release that she issued in 2015. It said the bill would require that a parent wanting to homeschool their child would provide their names and ages, the name and address of the parent, guardian, or other person in a parental relation to the child or children to the superintendent of the school district in which they reside. Let me just stop there. This is changing because Dr. Michael Rice is no longer wanting this to be where you report locally to your local public school. He wants every single child in Michigan to have to report to a centralized state education database controlled by the State Department of Education. We'll get to that in just a minute. So that would be a difference with this wording. In addition, the bill requires that at least twice a year the homeschooled children are seen by a person from the following list: a physician, licensed social workers, physician's assistant, friend of the court official, school counselor or teacher, audiologist, psychologist, law enforcement officer, marriage and family therapist, member of the clergy, or regulated child care provider. Now, our organization, Mission, was able to kill this in 2015 with 2 phone calls. Actually, pretty much one, but we called the chair of the House Education Committee and the chair of the Senate Education Committee. We said, this is bad news. This can't get out of committee. They said, it's DOA, we'll kill it, it'll never get out of committee. So a lot of people don't know that Mission, our organization, has been involved in defending homeschool freedom since 1984. We were there helping with establishing the current homeschooling laws that we have and killing bad bills almost on an annual basis during the past 40 years. But what a lot of people don't realize is we just did it quietly because the legislature was such that we had support. And so we didn't have to call you to meetings. We didn't have to have you calling your legislators and opposing these bills. We were able to just use the influence and relationships that we had within the legislature to make sure that these bills didn't go anywhere. And that's why elections are so important, right? Because I'm just going to shoot real straight with you. I'm going to be really honest with you. The conservative movement here in Michigan got super lazy, super comfortable, super lazy, and just thought, it's free here in Michigan, it'll always be free, and just stopped being active and engaged. And now, because of that, we're in the position that we are. So we don't know if Chang's bill is going to come back up or some variation of it, but we do know that Washington Post says that she wants that bill as it is written still to be passed. January 10th of this year, Dr. Michael Rice said he wants every child in the state of Michigan included on this centralized state education database controlled by the DOE. He's presented 4 education buckets, as he calls them. So you have public schools, parochial schools, private schools, and homeschools. Every child has to be registered annually with the state and included in one of those 4 buckets. This will change homeschool law. This will change private school law because private schools, Catholic schools, are not required, if they don't receive government money, state funds, they're not required to give personal private information about your children to the state. They provide a head count, so they'll say, okay, we have 75 children in this class in our Christian school, and so they know how many students are enrolled, but there's no personal data that follows your child through these government agencies. Catherine Boussard from Salt Lake Global will speak to that a little bit more later about some of the concerns of how this data can be used in a negative way and how it can adversely affect your child's future. On the Senate side, Senator Dana Polhanke, who is the Senate Education Chair, has told the Detroit News on February 19 that there is a regulation bill that has been written, apparently on the Senate side. She's not going to tell us who wrote it. So she knows about it, probably has seen it. She's just not going to tell us who wrote it or anything about it. So it's sort of being held. Our assumption is that it will probably wait until they feel like there's an opportunity to just run it through really quickly. That's why we've been asking people to contact their legislators now. On the House side, we know that there is one bill. Democratic Representative Kara Hope has told us that Representative Kimberly Edwards has written a homeschool regulation bill. So we know that she is the author of a bill on the House side. It has been written. It exists. It has been seen. In fact, she has created a group. I forget the word she used for her little group. But she's got some sort of group of legislators that she is talking about, advising them about how they should think about homeschooling. and has presented this bill. So she is on the Education Committee. We believe that there is possibly another bill in the House that has not been made public yet, but we think there's possibly two bills on the House side and then this one bill on the Senate side. In addition to that, in addition to the homeschool regulation bill, there was a bill that was just passed through the Senate Education Committee on the 18th. Today is the 20th, so 21st, so just 3 days ago. This is called Michigan Senate Bill 285, and this is calling for mandatory kindergarten. So every child in Michigan falls under the state's compulsory attendance laws at the age of 6 currently. This would lower that to the age of 5. And if you're wondering what the motive could possibly be for this, follow the money, right? So they have calculated and estimated, it's not exact, but they've calculated that probably $43.3 million of extra revenue to the public school system can be generated by forcing 5-year-olds to have to go to public school, to public kindergarten. Now, they are not seeking with this particular bill to abolish private schools and homeschools, so you would have the option to begin formal academic training of your children by paying to enroll them in a private Christian school at the age of 5, or beginning formal instruction at home as a homeschooler at the age of 5. But if you know anything about Exemption F, it says that you have to teach 9 academic subjects, and it lists them all out in an organized educational manner at home as the parent or legal guardian. And so you would, when your child turns 5, have to begin teaching them 9 subjects, including civics and math and all these other subjects, or you would be considered in violation of the compulsory attendance laws and could be deemed truant even as a homeschooler. So you are not exempted from this law. If you have a 5-year-old, it does apply to you. You have to have your child in one of the 4 buckets. They have to go to public school, parochial school, private school, or homeschool. You still have those 4 buckets, but you would be required to do this. Now, people have been asking us at Mission, is that this Senate Bill 285, is this a mandatory registration bill for private schools and homeschools? We've talked to our best attorneys, and we've also talked to HSLDA. We're convinced that this particular bill does not in itself require mandatory registration, but coupled with the "there is a bill and I can't say who" bill that Pohanky is apparently hiding, if the two go through together, then it would require that you have to also report your 5-year-old to the state, as well as have them in one of those 4 education buckets. So I just want you to, if you can, take your smartphones out here. I want you to scan this code. This is for signing up for email alerts from Mission. This is to let you know as new things are happening within the legislature. We are sending out emails constantly to keep you updated. So make sure you get on the email list. We have a clipboard that's also going around because there are emails that are also being provided from CTV and from Salt Lake Global. We want you to put your email on that clipboard. Make sure you get that back to us because we want to make sure that you are able to stay on top of what is happening. And then this is a separate barcode, and this is to a Google Drive that I've established that actually has the 285 bill in there, as well as a summary of the 285 bill, so you can actually read the wording for yourself, see what would be required by 285. There's also a lot of articles that address this issue. There's also some fact sheets that our 3 organizations, CTV, Salt and Light, and Mission, have established. And so we want you to stay informed on what is happening within the state of Michigan regarding these issues and your educational freedom. So I appreciate you letting me kind of get you caught up. I'm going to turn this back over to our other excellent panels, and then at the end of this, we're going to have some Q&A time so that you have an opportunity, if you have questions, to ask the panel. So if you want to go ahead and start formulating your questions, write them down, then we'll be ready to go with that whenever the Q&A time comes.
All right, so I'll go next. Jane Green, and so the same, what Israel just laid out for you all, the timeline is so essential, because I can understand how some folks like me might say, hey, we've got this stuff coming, we gotta be ready. But he just laid out an incredible timeline backed up by facts that is all up, that I should mention, based on a false premise. That we actually legitimately have systemic CPS issues, and our Attorney General is covering up some other garbage apparently too. And which is very unfortunate, because that is like an incredible red herring distracting us from these true issues that we, as the people of Michigan, should be taking care of, those especially vulnerable children. And unfortunately, they have then turned this into an opportunity to capitalize on attacking the homeschoolers and taking away our basic fundamental freedoms of parenting and educating our own children. I was also given that same promise, and that's what's so disheartening about all of this, is when I first came on, Representative Colazar and I did actually have a very healthy relationship, and he made a commitment to me around the same time that he made to Mission that, hey, I got nothing to do with homeschoolers. I'm going to be doing a lot, and I'm like, okay, I'm still going to, throw my typical minority party right now bombs at your repealing the A through F, so school accountability, repealing the third grade reading law, so repealing accountability for getting kids being able to read by the age of third grade. I'll write some things, but I'm going to let that go. But you just stay off homeschoolers, because if you touch the homeschoolers, I'm going to go full mama bear on you, and which I have. And that is part of the reason why we're here today, because when that tweet went up, I sat on it for 12 hours and prayed on it, and I was like, he cannot be doing this. Like, this is not real. And then he didn't stop, and then it just spiraled, and that's when I did need to actually take action. And so since December 6th, all four of us have been very busy committing our time, talents, and treasures to educating the community, the parents of Michigan, that we need to wake up and we need to get engaged and activated and stand by our basic fundamental beliefs that we believe, especially in our biblical Christian beliefs here in this building, that we need to defend and fight for. So for me, there is actually no compromise on here. And we've had a few representatives that joined us. Do you guys want to stand up real quick? Since they joined in last year. Can you just introduce yourself, Angela?
Yeah, come up here with me. Hi, State Representative Angela Regas. I actually represent about 20 minutes south of here, so Caledonia Byron Center and parts of Berry County, and I will always be committed to defending parental rights, and I will never stand for any of this. I stand with the homeschool parents always.
Thank you. Thank you. Gina Johnson from 78th House District. It's part of 4 counties, Eaton, Berry, Ionia, and Kent. And I also will always defend this. Keep in mind, it starts out with just the smallest group of those that make choice. It's the homeschoolers now. But Christian schools, parochial schools, private, anything alternative is next, because the governor made it perfectly clear when she first was elected. I want one kind of education in this state, our traditional government schools. And that takes away all our choice in our family, basic family function. Thanks.
And yes, thank them, because it's so important that they came today. And that's why it is so important for you to stay connected with your state legislators, whether Democrats or Republicans, because even on our side, some of us do silly things, and we make deals, and we're like, well, what's a registration? That's not that big of a deal. We can make this right. No, there is absolutely no compromise in that. And so I guess I'm going to give a few tips of outreach on connecting with your legislators as well. So we receive a tremendous amount of information constantly, thousands of emails. I even have one I wish people cared about puppies as much as they cared about children. I'm not kidding you. I have like 14,000 emails in one email box that just has to do with, and it's not even like protecting puppies, it's to stop puppy stores. So, which is, I mean, I protect animals. Animals don't have rights, people have rights, but we need to be humane and take care of God's creation. But for crying out loud, 14,000 emails about puppies, and then here we are. I'm very thankful you're here, but it's unfortunate that we don't have 14,000 people who are worried about children.
Yeah.
And so we receive a lot of information. So that is why it is so important for each one of you to make individual touch points with your legislators and to encourage your neighbors and your friends and your relatives across the state to encourage to make those touch points as well. And that would be, so sending an email is great. If it is a form email, it most likely goes into a box and we just keep track of the number of them so we're watching them. A personal one that is nice, short, tight, to the point, and isn't angry goes a long way as well. What goes even further is also then layering it. I'm a classical educator by nature, so I believe in lots of layering and repetition. So that touch point of that email, a nice card, even if you're a praying person, we're praying for you. If you're not even a praying person, we're thinking about you. We hope you're having a good day. So a nice card will even go a long way. An office visit, a scheduled office visit, you actually have that opportunity as a constituent, especially of a state representative or a senator. You can call up and schedule a personal appointment with them. If you do it in a group, it usually helps, so we're not doing like with 100 of you. But at the same time, those personal touch points, even in our office, is really nice. I even sometimes bring them a cake or a cookie too. They might, at least their staff will love it. And that is another great opportunity. One thing that is the most important is if they have coffee hours, that you go visit and you just listen. You don't always have to speak up, but even just every time they have one, that's another touch point, a familiar face that they have made a connection with. And above all, like, do have that those beatitudes, that self-control, that kindness, that patience, that gentle spirit upon you when you are working with them. We do have tough jobs, and we get a lot of angry people, and that is one way to shut off a legislator really quickly is to there's a difference between that like righteous anger and then that you get in the flesh. Y'all know we've been there sometimes, especially with some of our little 5-year-olds who should not be sitting down, by the way, they need to be out playing. And just have that gentle spirit upon you. A kindness does go a long way with the legislator because we are human. We're going to be here for a lot of extra questions, but just really take in and soak up what Israel has said, and because it is go time. Because when these bills get dropped, which they potentially can, we have 2 races that the House is waiting on. So the Senate has been doing their fun thing, so while the House is tied right now. So 2 of the Democrat legislators won their races. So we are now at a 54-54 seated member. So the only way for legislation to currently pass is that a Republican will need to hop over and join them on the other side, which actually has unfortunately happened. So for anything to pass right this very moment, this is why we're doing this during this time, because God has actually provided an opportunity for us and to get out and do some outreach and to get people awake from their sleeping. But that could potentially change in the middle of April, because that seat in Westland and the seat in Warren are up for grabs. Now, granted, there have been a lot of people going from around the state on both sides. I will say, I'm trying to maintain political, but on both sides of the states that are going and helping those candidates, because if for some reason one of those seats flips over, we are then still at a tie, and then nothing can happen. Right? That is the goal. But if they do win, then it's back to business as usual, which is unfortunate because we also then have that, so just walk with me on this little political mind jargon, but then we have a huge election then this November. It is looking promising for the Republicans, but it also looked promising 2 years ago, so I don't believe anything anymore because that's, again, we need to, especially as believers, get energized and wake back up because if the church actually voted, the landscape in this state would be very different. Yes. So, if we do flip that seat, those houses in November, we have something, here's your civic lesson, so all you 5-year-olds, this can count for it. We have something called lame duck session, which is after the election happens, they could potentially just run these bills without committee, without speeches, without a voice, and just go boom, 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 and there's absolutely nothing we can stop it. So that's why April, we have been paying special attention to, and we are praying that God will give favor on us and remember us in Michigan so that we can again continue and not just be the remnant. And I don't want that, but I know biblically that's happened in the past. And so that is why God has called me to come over from Macomb County to here in Grand Rapids to share this homeschool mama's heart, who has then been ushered to be the vice education chair for the state of Michigan, to serve you in this way right now. And so I pray that after you leave this, your life will be changed. First, you will, of course, if you have not committed, you know what, hey, I'm just going to roll with it. If none of you here, if somebody is here and hasn't given their life to Jesus, I know this sounds so crazy right now. I'm going to start crying. Right now, just in your heart right now, that we have a Savior who does love us, who does have a remnant, and who will ultimately, maybe not here on earth, but we will be protected in heaven. And that's what that kingdom come, that will be done actually means. So, we have 2 more fantastic speakers that are going to pour even more truth into you and equip you. And so I know this is probably getting longer than we normally do. God has put an anointing on this moment today, and you are here by very specific appointment, that you are to carry this message then forward to your friends and your neighbors and to the rest of the state of Michigan. So thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Catherine Boussard with Salt and Light Global, and Salt and Light Global, we work to defend parental rights, homeschooling, faith, and freedom in Michigan, where our whole team is based across this nation and around the world. And I want to just piggyback and carry on with some of the good things that have already been shared. And first things first, to Representative Green's point just now, we're all coming at this from the perspective of believers, and I know there are a ton of Christian homeschoolers out there. I know there's also some secular homeschoolers that maybe you don't know Jesus. If you're here and that's your worldview, we're glad you're here. I'm still going to speak from a Christian worldview because that is who I am, that is what we do at Salt and Light Global. But if you're curious about knowing Jesus and you don't know Jesus and you want to know how to do that, see any of us up on stage here, you would make our day if you asked more about our faith. We would love to share with you. So grab us after. We would really, really love to share. But I want to start out, too, with this kind of mindset. When we think about parental rights, when we think about homeschooling, private education, education choice, what is the real foundation of this? And again, let's think biblically about this. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Lord was telling his people that, when you get up in the morning, you should teach your children the word of God. And when you put them in bed at night, and when you walk down the road, when you go into your house, when you come out of your house, your job, what is it? To teach them the word of God. Now, who was he speaking to? Was he speaking to the government, anyone? No. Who was he speaking to? Parents, you guys are with it. And the same in Proverbs 22, train them up in the way they should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it. He was speaking to parents. The commandment from ancient times, and the most ancient traditions of our faith are that God has called parents to raise those children. We believe that children are a gift from the Lord. They're a heritage from the Lord. God knows each child before they're born. He places them in the womb of the mother that he intends to raise them in. Not that God can do beautiful things through adoption and so many other things, but God has a plan for that child's life. And if you're parenting a child, you are a plan for that child's life. Don't doubt it for a moment, and don't think that the government has a right to come in and change what the God of the universe has called you to do. You are called to disciple that child. And this is a natural fundamental right. Now, we don't ask we don't ask government for permission to pray. We don't say, we're going to worship our God the way he's told us to, and we have to get the state of Michigan's blessing on that. Likewise, we should not ask the state of Michigan's blessing or be required to ask the state of Michigan's blessing to educate our child in the way that our God has called us to do that. This is really important to understand because the bigger picture here that has been understood from ancient biblical times all the way forward in Western history and honestly around the world is that parental rights is a fundamental natural liberty from the Creator to every parent. It is not something for government to intervene with. And so with that perspective in mind, in our American constitutional system, we have the 14th Amendment that provides equal protection under the law. For more than 120 years, this U.S. Supreme Court has consistently upheld parental rights, parental liberties, as part of that 14th Amendment protection. But what's even more important when we remember why we do what we do, that we do this out of obedience to God because God has called parents to disciple their children. Obedience to God is an exercise of religious liberty. Does anyone know where that is enshrined in the Constitution? I'm hearing whispers. First Amendment. This is a First Amendment liberty that government shall make no law that would infringe on the free exercise of your religious conscience. That is the first thing in the United States Constitution. It is also protected in the state of Michigan Constitution. It's further enshrined in Michigan law. But we're not talking about just some weak little law that's been around for a while. We're talking about the First Amendment. We are talking about a civil right here. And any government entity that's going to come out and say, we feel we just need to dip our toe in just a little bit of infringement on your liberty is okay. This is a civil rights battle, and it's time that we own it as that. I want to share, when I say that this is very well protected, we have just a really simple one-page parental rights words that work card out there for you. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said this in the case of Pierce versus the Society of Sisters. The child is not the mere creature of the state. In other words, government doesn't get to have the primary control. They went on to say, those who nurture him and direct his destiny have the right coupled with the high duty to recognize and prepare that child for additional obligations. Supreme Court of the United States, your job, not the government's, is to train your child. The state of Michigan also has a law, MCL 380.10. Back when homeschooling was being fought, Attorney Dave Kallman worked with Michigan legislators to help pass this, and it's still standing. The new bills that are out there are not seeking to change this, which is very encouraging, and it says this: it is the natural fundamental right of parents to determine and direct the care, teaching, and education of their children. The natural fundamental right of parents. So, again, biblically protected, constitutionally protected in our state law. This is a very solid thing. But what we're seeing all of a sudden, truly in very recent history, as Israel shared, is this huge shift in paradigm to this idea that the state, not the parents, should be in control of a child's education. And there's a lot at stake here. We can talk about the money. Homeschooling alone to the state of Michigan is worth about $500 billion in lost revenue to public school districts each year. $500 million, yes, and we hit the billions with a B when we add in private schools. If you start talking about private education in Michigan, that's worth about $1.5 billion. Private school plus homeschool, we're talking about $2 billion a year in so-called lost revenue to local public schools. Now, you all pay your taxes, right? You still pay your taxes even though you choose private education. So the state's still collecting this revenue. And it's really a misnomer that you guys should know, and I want to make sure our legislators know. You can talk to Ms. Cleary at the House Fiscal Agency if you have questions. Don't just take my word for it. But this money that's being collected by the state, it goes out in accordance with student population, but there's leftover when homeschoolers and private schoolers do their thing. The state still collects that money, but they don't necessarily have a local school district that it's assigned to. So it comes back in the education fund to the legislators to say, you know what, we think we need more money for mental health, or for school security, or for maybe English as a second language programs, or whatever you guys think public schools need. That money just becomes extra money that the legislator gets to decide each year where it goes. So your tax dollars are still going to public schools. In fact, you're kind of helping them get some of those extra items that really aren't in their day-to-day budget. And that's not a bad thing. So this narrative that homeschoolers or private schoolers are taking away money from local school districts and crippling them is really not true at all. And I didn't mean to get into that too much. But again, this idea that the state should have control. There's so many statements Israel's read. I won't cover that too much. But money is one of the reasons that they want control. Another reason is just indoctrination. And that's a word that sounds bad and conspiratorial. It's really not. As Israel also said, when they talk about taking away your liberty, we should listen to them. And the Michigan Democratic Party, who is the policy majority in the legislature, we're not trying to be partisan, but they're driving the majority of the policy. This is what they posted on X about a month or two ago. They said, quote, "Not sure where this parent should control what is taught in schools because they are our kids' idea is originating, but parents do have the option to choose to send their kids to selected private school at their own expense if this is what they desire." Notice they didn't mention homeschooling at all as a legitimate option. That's very concerning to me. The quote continues, "The purpose of a public education in a public school is not to teach kids only what parents want them to be taught. It is to teach what society needs them to know. The client of the public school is not the parent, but the entire community, the public." If you had any doubts that what we're battling today is absolute social engineering of generations, that quote, I hope, really does clarify it. Money, social engineering of your children and of every generation that comes after. And then there's a third piece here, which is registration. And we know that the bill written by Kim Edwards directly deals with registration of homeschoolers and all private schools. Every single student who is not in a public school will be affected just by the first bill. And they're talking about registration. And a lot of people say, what's the big deal about putting a name on a list? It's just registration. It's so much more. In public schools, they use this thing called a UIC, Unique Identification Code, to track data from each child. And that data is shared from school to school as this child moves throughout their education career. If you had behavioral problems in one school, when you show up in the next school, they already know what the teacher said about you at the school before. That could be concerning for a variety of reasons. But it also tracks things like your test performance, your vaccine history, your medical history that the school knows about, information about your family's socioeconomic status, perhaps your parents' political views or religious views. All of these issues become part of the data tracked by My Data Hub. You can go on their website, you can watch a really cute little cartoon video that tells you about how they track all these things, because they want it to be easier for children to adjust moving from school to school. Israel actually did a video with Alex Newman, who is really an expert on this data mining, because that's what it is. It really is data mining of children. And in other countries, they're currently using this material to determine, well, you know, is this child really qualified to be a doctor? Do we want someone with a biblical worldview like that going to school to be a lawyer someday? Probably not. They can only, do this one community college program, and they're limiting opportunities for children based on these factors like faith and socioeconomic status and political views of a family. So to have our government start collecting that data and tracking it and sharing it, and by the way, 96% of Michigan public schools already participate in this program. The rest are being onboarded. This is kind of a mandatory thing from the state. This idea that somehow Michigan might have a really different non-nefarious purpose for this is just something that I'm not willing to gamble a generation's future on. And I hope that you're not either. But this is the type of registration data that public schools are collecting. And if we're talking about, as Representative Johnson said, a parallel system of education, one system throughout the state, why would we think that when they talk about registration for private education, that they're thinking just a name on a list? I think they're probably after a parallel system where they ask for the same data fields, at the very least. It only makes sense because you want that data to follow if the student goes from public school to private school, back to public school, and to any other option that they would allow. And so we need to not be naive in thinking that this is just your child's name, their grade, or anything like that. And there's a lot of damage that can be done by that data. I really encourage you to watch that video. I don't want to belabor that too much. And so looking at where we're at today, the scripture that came to mind earlier driving here was Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that we have been set free. Therefore, do not let the yoke of slavery fall upon you again, but stand firm. This freedom that we have in Michigan that was so hard fought so many years ago, that so many people went to prison for and spent years in legal battles for and risked their children being taken away for, this freedom that we've enjoyed very comfortably for the last 30 plus years is a freedom that we need to steward. It's something that we need to stand firm in today. There is a cause worth fighting for. And so the question then is, how do we effectively do that as believers? Representative Green gave some really wonderful points on that. I'm just going to quickly point out a few handouts that we have. All of us up here, we worked on this sheet called Protecting Michigan's Homeschool Law. It gives you more history, and then it talks about really some of the things that are at stake here with research, data, things to help correct the narrative, because we've heard there is a false narrative out there, and they're trying to weaponize that false narrative to say, no, it's really justified for the government to interfere and infringe on that fundamental liberty. And there's some important data on here. Did you know when they talk about homeschoolers not being safe, we have to do this for children's safety? That's the number one argument they're making. Homeschooling is 257% safer than public education. Is that amazing? 257% safer. Yes, give yourself a round of applause on that. Well done, parents. You're doing something really right. If you're sending your child to a private school, private Christian school, that child is statistically at least 80% safer than a child in a public school. Not because private schools are doing a bad job, but sometimes the neighborhoods you're being transported in and out of can have risks and things like that. But 80%, 257%, all of that is going in a good direction. There's also statistically a 0% correlation between homeschooling and child abuse. 0%. The form of education that a parent chooses does not impact whether or not they abuse their child. And that's something that we need to set the record straight on as well. Homeschoolers are not child abusers, and Israel did a really good job of laying that data down. But on this sheet with the blue bar, you can find footnotes to all of this research. You can also find footnotes to things like 72% of Michigan students are not reading or operating at grade level according to state standards. 72%. Homeschoolers perform typically in the 90th percentile or above, like the vast majority. It's a huge dichotomy there. When we talk about safety, again, public schools have so many problems with bullying, with shootings. Sexual abuse is rampant. There's a study from Psychology Today, May 2023, that 11.7% of students in a public school, that's more than 1 in 10 children, will experience sexual abuse or misconduct at the hands of a public school staff member, not even from their peers. And the peer-to-peer stuff happens too. There's a huge safety crisis, and it needs the attention of our legislators, because the students in public schools do deserve better than that. No child should have to go through something like that. But coming after homeschoolers doesn't fix the problem. So some things that we really want to focus on is showcasing how successful homeschooling is. When you go to that coffee hour, when you write a letter, when you have a meeting with your state representative, let them see your children. Let them see that they're healthy, happy, normal kids. Have your kids write a letter or color a picture if they're young, and send that to the state rep's office Here's what I love about homeschooling. Showcase our success. We want to set the record straight in those letters and emails and conversations. Share this data, share these facts. There's more even in that you can cover than I'm covering now. And number 3 is to help suggest real solutions. Refocus their energy. We have good, godly people that want to serve, that want to make a difference in the legislature. Let's help them find the areas that need their attention most, like the students in public schools that are experiencing so much hardship, and let's help them find ways to fix those problems rather than trying to come after homeschooling, again, when this is a well-protected, successful thing already. So again, grab one of these blue sheets out there. We have a sheet on private school as well, and I think most of this room, do we have any private school students in the room or parents? Just 1 or 2 there. We have a sheet with a green bar. I encourage you to grab that as well. It has some additional research, and it has a chart really explaining some of the worldview issues that we're battling. And then the last thing I'm going to mention really quickly, probably one of the most practical things you can grab if you're here today. Again, Attorney David Coleman, who won these landmark homeschool cases, helped craft our parental rights law in the state of Michigan. He wrote this sheet on what to do if the government shows up at your door. Because we're believing, Lord willing, we're going to make a difference. This legislation, we're going to do everything we can to stop it. But if you have a truancy officer that says, I'm going to knock on your door, I'm going to see if I can do a home visit, we want you to be prepared for that occasion. So this equips you step by step, 10 things you can do to know how to answer that response. And the first thing, don't let them in your home. I'll let you read through the rest of that. We have lots of copies of this out there. We want you to go home well-resourced. I think there's a clipboard circulating. Please make sure that you fill that out if you find this information valuable, because all of us will email you more information as we move on. But I'm going to wrap it up there. Again, Galatians 5:1. It is for freedom that we've been set free. We have to steward the freedom that God has given us to educate our children, to know Him, and to continue to disciple them. Thank you very much.
All right, I get to do cleanup. Love it. I love being on this panel, let me tell you. I learn something new every single time we meet. We have a lot of discussions. I'm Eileen McNeil. I'm president of Citizens for Traditional Values. We've been in existence since 1989 to preserve, promote, protect our Judeo-Christian values, both in the community and in our state legislature. We advocate, we educate, we do trainings, and we do things like this. When educational freedom is a core principle that we have always fought for. My predecessor, James Muffett, was one of the first to fight with Mission and actually create Inch and Mission to fight for the right to homeschool. So I stand on his shoulders and fighting and being advocates with your state legislators in committee hearings. And I'm going to just get right to, now you've heard a lot, you're absorbing a lot. We all recognize, okay, we really don't want this bill to pass. What do? I hate to have you leave thinking, oh, that was great, and now I know. Okay, no, we need you to be active, and how can you do that? We have our legislators here, our state senators. You have another state senator, Senator Winnie Brink. May not agree with you on this issue, but she has coffee hours. And she probably will have some over spring break and have time. That's a great time for you to take maybe 5 of you, or 2 or even 2 or 3 of your families together and go to one of her coffee hours, Senator Winnie Brink. Another one, who lives in, I know we must have people from Kentwood, East Grand Rapids, and Cascade here. I see a show of hands, anyone in those areas? So your representative is Representative Phil Skaggs. Exactly. Thank you, Angela. May not agree with you, but he needs to see your face. And he needs to see that you care about this issue, that you're watching this issue, that you are voters. This is an election year, folks. If ever is there a year to use your authority as a citizen is now. And while we all are thrilled to bring this issue about homeschooling to you, every election cycle, CTV gets involved in elections because we believe there is responsible Christian citizenship. And we're fortunate that we have what they call a C4 and a PAC, that we literally send out voter guides, but we first, to do voter guides, we send out endorsement surveys. Sorry, going blank. Questionnaires, candidate questionnaires to all of our House and Senate candidates. And we focus on 10 to 12 questions. We don't make it hard. We don't ask for essay questions, although that would be interesting. But we want to know where they stand in terms of our core key values, life and educational freedom, and what's the role of government, and what do they consider family, and do you believe in the Judeo-Christian value of families that have actually built the foundation of our nation? But we get very specific on some questions, such as the one that was very important that passed last year. I want to show you guys. Please take this home. Please read it. I won't go over all these things. But it says elections have consequences. Well, I mean, there are bills that passed, and I'm sure that you will be very upset to see that they passed last year. Let's just start with the abortion agenda that was advanced after the constitutional proposal was passed. But that didn't automatically mean that all the laws that we had put in place to protect women and babies were automatically taken off the books. They had to go through the legislative process. Well, and many of them did. And it was a big fight. But now, and we lost on many of them. And we needed more voices to be there and talking to legislators and saying, no. Okay, abortion is legal in Michigan, but don't get rid of all the clinics regulations that really have kept women safe, that all these years while abortion was legal, Right to Life and many groups like ours and all the other conservative organizations were fighting for, okay, women need at least to know and have a 24-hour waiting period to have time to read the repercussions of their decisions and all the information about their decision. They need to know that the doctor who's performing on them is a certified physician. They need to know that the hallways and the clinics are wide enough in case there's an emergency that the ambulance can get their cots in. Well, you know what? Those were just written out. The 24-hour waiting period was one victory. They did not get rid of that, I believe. I think that was right. And they didn't pass Medicaid funding abortion. So at least our tax dollars are not paid for Medicaid, funded abortions. But those are coming. They're going to keep trying. The abortion industry is ready to, and then next is parental consent. And I know you care about these, and I know this isn't homeschooling, but I urge you, as our group is why we're here, is that someone said this to me yesterday. If we don't send people who align with our values to Lansing and to Washington, Lansing and Washington come to us. And I know that's not what we want. I mean, really, we want a limited government. We know that our authority and our abilities to, and our fundamental rights as parents to raise our children is much better than anything a government program can produce. But in order to have that philosophy in our state government and in our federal government, we have to send people there. I mean, I so appreciate our representatives and senators are here today, because guess what? It takes time, money, talent, treasure. It is hard work. So if you hear of anyone running for office, please help them. Would you call it homeschool? Would you call it team?
It could be homeschool gym to go door knocking.
Yeah. Kids go door knocking, helping county commissioners. I see Matt Coleman's here. Homeschool door knocking. Matt Coleman has been on the county commission. Thank you, Matt. It's been awesome. And there may be other candidates that sometimes people just need to be asked. And guess what? You don't have to be in the state house. We need people running for those school boards. We need people running. And why do I say school boards? Because your kids that you're raising so beautifully, they are going to work Liv, Mary, all kids from public school systems. We want a good public school. We want morality in our culture. But, you know, if we don't get involved in that, if we don't kind of send people who align with our values to Lansing and Washington, we have what we have today. We're having to fight for a law we already fought for 30 years ago. So I just say that to encourage you. And the other, before I leave that, who lives in Northeast Grand Rapids Township, Plainfield, Ada, or Comstock Park? Because your representative is Representative Rachel Hood. She's my representative. I'm going to set up an appointment with her shortly. And Representative John Fitzgerald, who's from Wyoming. Wyoming. I think Representative Fitzgerald needs to hear from you too.
Yes, he does. He's a fifth generation politician. They were all Republicans, but he's a Democrat.
Yes. Yes, and they're very active.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing this up to show you these our good legislators have these books. And I brought these names up to you because look them up. It has their name, their picture, their address, the maps, so if you're sure now, I don't know where the line is, the lines. And I mean, this is like the Bible to the state legislature is what I call it. And, you know, mark your pictures in there, Roger your picture in there. And this really helps you find out, well, I don't know who's my rep, you know, or you go online and say, find my legislator. That's easy to do. But I love this resource. And as we go into our next, this coming fall, this coming summer, please talk to your pastors. You're all from different churches. I'm not assuming everyone goes to this church. And we love to Corey. He's been awesome. But we need our pastors to talk to their congregations about these moral issues that determine the culture. And, you know, if we can't like turn left and exit because we don't like what we're hearing. That's why I got engaged. And I have a son, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what kind of world am I leaving? Yeah, teenager. And so, as parents, we also need to reach out to our pastors who have been, I want to say on behalf of the defensive pastors, they've been bombarded during COVID and everybody arguing. And when I say come to them, I mean gracious, kind, to say, hey, could we have a civic group start and talk about the issues and, you know, do it very graciously and don't burden him. But then when, you know, churches are allowed to do a lot of things. There's a page that I want you all to take to your pastor. It says do's and don'ts for churches. You know, you can have registration tables. Actually, mostly everyone's registered now, and you get a driver's license. And now 16 can also be registered for when they turn. But you know, you can do registry. You can tell people, are you registered? And then just talk to your neighbors, talk to the people in your pews. Hey, when those primaries and when the general come, hey, did you vote? And, you know, it'd be even better if you voted early. Because then all the people who are concerned about, did the people get out to vote? They can check you off the list if you went and voted. They don't know how you voted, but they just know that you voted. And so really good people that are running for these positions have, you know, one less 50-cent stamp to mail if you vote early. And I just want to encourage you in those things because that's all part of being a responsible citizen. And it helps all of us in these issues. And now I want to go to Q&A because we've done enough talking. And happy to take any questions to anyone of us.
And thank you all for taking up this issue. My name is Rebecca Curran. I'm an Ottawa County Commissioner, and I'm also a U.S. Senate candidate. And my question was, currently, since the legislature is split, is there a possibility to write up a law to counter what they're trying to do and flip a Democrat? Because someone said, oh, well, a Republican would have to flip to the other side. Is there a potential to flip Democrat to our side?
I'll take that question. So I'm going to take no. If you actually watched what they passed this last year, they were crying at their desk. Crying. If my caucus leader made me cry at my desk, I would probably exchange unsavory Christian-like words with him. But, oh yeah, the blood pressure cuff on Rachel Hood. There's actually a reason she's probably not running. She was one of those who cried because she was forced by her party to vote the way, and they were threatened. We live in a very satanic, crazy world.
Yes.
So no, they have not broken party lines yet. They will not break party lines because their retaliation for each other is so bad. So remember, they don't believe in freedom. They actually, I fought, so who's Phil Skaggs? I'm a little bit irritated with him right now because he lectured a bunch of 7th graders on how the Republicans were blocking his resolution for a We the People civics thing. And why we blocked it is because for a civics group, he said that we have a constitutional democracy. We're like, no, we are not past, yes, Phil Skaggs. Somebody needs to go take him like a constitution, please. And we kept correcting him, no, we live in a constitutional republic. It's very different. You have a democracy in your caucus, we're a republic. You don't elect people in your caucus, we elect people in our caucus. Very different. So no, and that is why those 2 elections right now we have till the middle of April, that's our only stopgap. So all you people in Grand Rapids, if I can drive over to Macomb County, or drive from Macomb County to Grand Rapids, you can come on over to Macomb County, walk in Warren. You can go also and walk in Westland. I know, don't look at me like that.
Or make phone calls.
Or make phone calls. Or send him $10. Like you have time, talents, and treasures. But there are ways that if we beat this, we can stop this. Right now, our saving grace could potentially be this August election, but there's nobody that's going to. They're not going to flip on their side. And I'm actually genuinely concerned about some of our Republicans because they like to broker deals. And I don't. They think
I think Representative Johnson had something to add to that, though.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Representative Green said. I can't emphasize enough. You can write letters, you can write emails, and you can hope and pray, and you should be. But if the homeschool world, the Christians and the hunters don't get involved in voting and sacrificing some summertime, vacation time to help win elections, homeschooling is toast. Doesn't matter how many coffee hours you go to, doesn't matter where you go. We don't have a majority. Senate Majority Leader determines what bills get heard at all in the Senate. House, it's the House Leader, Speaker of the House. They determine it. They won't even let us take up those bills. We'll never see them. It's all about majority, guys. It's all about majority. And I will add this. While Republicans look like we're all fighting amongst ourselves, don't you dare engage in any of that nonsense. It is a waste of time. Stay focused. We win April 16th. If you'll help, everybody can make 100 phone calls. Everybody in the world can make 100 phone calls. Your 12-year-old can make 100 phone calls. We all are making phone calls. I'm sending as much money as I can squeeze out of everywhere to help Josh Powell and Westland win. Because we put the brakes on for the rest of the year if we win that 1 seat. That's right now. We win November, we no longer have to worry about homeschooling. But every election cycle depends on everybody here. Raise your children to know the importance. Thank you.
The statistics, 257% that homeschooling is safer. Where does that come from?
Yeah, that is a study called the Gen 2 survey. So GEN, the number 2, and then survey. If you do a Google search for it, there's a PDF document. It was the largest study of church millennials to date. So it was about 11,000 young adults who were surveyed. It was anonymous. And they talked about a lot of things, including their history with abuse, sexual abuse in schools. And so they were able to say whether they were raised in a public school, private school, or homeschool. And it turned out that the homeschool students we're 257% safer than those in public schools. So Gen 2 survey.
We have time for one more question.
I have a question. Okay. What would you say, like, I know a lot of homeschoolers take part in these homeschool partnerships with public schools like Jensen and Hamilton and Niles. So what would you say are the implications if you're already involved in something like that, or what would be your advice?
Michigan Christian Homeschool Network has had conversations with a lot of the state homeschool partnerships. And, one thing, if you're enrolled in a partnership, you're already registered with the state. So they don't have a whole lot of incentive in one sense to get behind this and fight it. But they have told us that they would. And we have seen some cooperation on the part of the partnerships to fight the registration bill. So we're thankful for that they've been involved with that. Mission has written some position papers regarding partnerships, so to talk to you later, I can get you some links to those articles. But we are thankful that some of the partnerships have decided to oppose the regulation bills. And then while I have the mic, I also wanted to just mention that Mission has an annual state homeschool convention that's happened every year since 1984. I guess the Democrats killed it in 2020. But every other year, we're going to be May 9 through 11 in Lansing. So go to michn.org. You can register now. It is the largest homeschool gathering in the state. We have the largest used curriculum sale. We have great speakers. We have vendors. There are going to be legislators that were willing will be there. We're going to invite them to be there, and you can meet them in person. And so we hope that you will mark that on the calendar, May 9 through 11 in Lansing. Make sure that you and your family are there. Stuff for children, stuff for teens. It's great for the whole family.
I want to add on to that question real quick. I serve on a local public school board, mostly because I believe those children need a voice and an advocate as well. And I've spent the last 6 months or so of my life receiving phone calls from crying parents and meeting with distraught parents because their children are experiencing violence, sexual assault, and a number of other things because of the Elliott Larson expansion. School policies across the state, driven by state organizations, are saying you have to allow biological boys in girls' bathrooms and a myriad of other things like that are threats to children's safety. If your child is going to public school to play sports, you should not dismiss the very real possibility that the bathroom or locker room that they're using while at that facility has only their same sex in it. If they're competing with other school districts playing sports, you should not dismiss the idea that a perfectly grown man could walk into your daughter's locker room or bathroom during a basketball game. These things are happening in numbers that would shock you. They're just not talked about because it does not suit the narrative. If your child's just going for art class or for band or something else like that, you won't find out what happens until it has happened. It's not, going to be talked about, well, this could happen, this is a possible risk. These things are only coming to light after a child has been injured. And so my caution to parents would be to consider the culture that we live in. And before you let Caesar, raise your child, if you're sending your child to Caesar's school, don't be surprised when a good little Roman soldier comes home. There's a very diametric difference in worldview. And not again, not to knock or shame, I have become extremely just grieved in my soul after listening to parents and students about what they've gone through, things that no child should be going through. And after months of fighting as a minority on a school board, much like these legislators, there's only so much we can do in the minority. And until we fix that, children are at risk.
Hey, having said that, one more thing. April 13th, Saturday, April 13th, Easter's done, and people are kind of back to their school lives, but Saturday, April 13th. If you have any inclination that you want to serve on a school board or a township or a county commission, or you want to help a candidate but don't know how, kind of want to know more about this whole thing, Citizens for Traditional Values is hosting a political leadership academy, kind of a campaign school training in the Elk and Rose event space right in downtown Holland. It's really cheap for the whole day, 9 to 4. It'll be $75, and we'll feed you in the morning and at lunch. But we really have a really good training, so you can feel familiar with, okay, what does that look like? What's a campaign plan look like? What does it mean to, how do I know how many voters I have to reach? Because it's a daunting thing if you've never thought about running for office, or maybe you have a friend who's thinking about it. I just wanted to make sure you knew that training, we just kind of confirmed it. I know this is kind of late, but we just confirmed it. So if you're at all interested, our websites, you all signed up, or hopefully you signed up. I don't know where that the sheets went to. Hopefully you passed by everybody. But we do updates twice a month to kind of keep people in the loop as to what kind of major legislation is going through, and also any trainings that we're doing. So if you're interested, you're welcome to sign up. We make it very simple.
We cut off. I think we're cut off at our time.
We need to leave here by 5:30.
Okay, so as we are packing up outside our stuff, we will be happy to answer more questions. You guys have the QR code. You have access to these fantastic speakers, and you do have also senators and state representatives on your west side. And Israel, you will close us in prayer.
All right, let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for the fact that you have entrusted us with children that we know are more important to you even than they are to us. So, Lord, we ask for your care and your protection over them. Help us, Lord, to be able to be wise in stewarding and guiding them. And Lord, we do pray that you would protect our freedoms. Help us to be able to raise our children in the right way. And we commit this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for coming.
Well, we did it once, girls. We can do it again. Yeah. Here we are again.